Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 24, Episode 6. Coming up on the show, we've got Mind Melters of the Norwegian Sea, How to Stop Hannibal's Elephant Tanks, and the Ancient Chinese Cuckamaton. I'm Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
So after we did that episode last week about terrifying Chinese technologies, you just had to take it a little bit further?
Yes. It's terrifying ancient Chinese technology where there's an automated cuckoldry device that is unleashed about 1,500 years ago.
What do you mean 1,500 years ago?
I'll have to explain in my segment coming up. What are the mind melters of the Norwegian Sea?
Okay, it's not what you think, but of course it's Mysterious Universe, so it's never what you think. But I was going into Nick Redfern's new book, and of course, we're big fans of Nick here. And his new book is Monsters of the Deep. And of course, on the cover is a sea monster. I was like, oh, this is great. I love sea monsters. I started going through it. And I very quickly realized that it's not, while sea monsters obviously play a really big role in the book, it's more about the ambiguity of the mind and how that plays a role in the paranormal experiences that people have.
The old Nessie bait and switch.
It's really clever, actually, because you don't work it out until almost the very end of the book. So we're going to go into some classic cases. Some of them you may have heard. We're going to go into some brand new cases that you've never heard. And we're really going to peel back the layers of... Jonathan Downes has a really fascinating theory about why people see paranormal creatures.
Right.
And why they experience them.
Is it like Loch Ness is a metaphor for Keynesian economics?
No, nothing like that at all, fortunately.
Okay.
No, there's no subtle weirdness, nothing like that.
Well, I got Frank Joseph's new book, Ancient High Tech, The Astonishing Scientific Achievements of Early Civilizations. Joseph is great with these ancient history books. He's written, 3 or 4 on Atlantis, Ancient America, Atlantis and the Coming Ice Age. And this is going back to his favorite topic. His previous book was Military Encounters with ETs, which was a bit of a sidestep for him. But yeah, going back to what he knows best, and this is full of some incredible stuff. I was really surprised at how fun this was in the early chapters. He eventually goes into some very detailed engineering explanations for some of the mysteries of the Great Pyramid, which we might go into if we have time. But I've been looking forward to talking about this all week. Especially, I was looking for those ooh parts that just blow your mind.
It's weird that you would raise that, actually, because I was actually reading articles last week about a new theory that's come out about the idea of ooh parts. Out of place objects. Artifacts, right, yeah. But I mean, they're also, objects as well. So out of place items.
But that's what the ooh part is, out of place artifacts.
Great. But some of these things that people find, like, for example, there's stories of where there were miners that were bringing up coal and they hit some stones, and when they pulled up these stones, they cracked the stone in half and there was a spark plug inside the stone.
Yeah. Or remember the metal cube?
No, I don't remember the metal cube.
They cracked open a big piece of coal and there was a perfect metal cube inside.
Oh, yeah. The
coal was like 1 million years old.
Yeah, that's the thing. So these items that they find, another one was a great example was this chain, this gold chain that clearly had been engineered at some point. It was in the middle of solid granite, and that granite had to be at least hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years old, and somehow it was stuck in the middle. And the new theory that was coming around was that some people have said it's teleportation, it's time slips that are causing these things to, appear inside solid rock. No, the other theory was just very simply that civilization, like you were talking about recently, Ben, with cycles, basically every cycle a civilization goes through, we develop the same technologies. And they end up getting stuck and lost. They're a little bit different, but ultimately they're the same.
Well, there's a bunch of examples here where you're right. We find that new inventions are simply reinventions.
Yeah.
It's just that we've forgotten the original invention. So one example he gives in the introduction, he talks about this temple in southeastern India. It's the Panchavarnaswamy temple. It's cited in a 7th century text, but there's evidence that it's older than that. So it's at least from the 7th century. And carved on one of the walls is a man in Hindu clothing riding a bicycle. He says there's no renovations or new artwork were undertaken at the temple in recorded history, according to the Indian researcher Praveen Mohar. He also points out that the anomalous bike rider could only have been carved when the stone on which he appears was horizontal, before subsequently being installed to its present vertical position. See, when you Google this one, there's immediately the usual, no, actually Snopes says that it was added in the 1920s.
Right.
But if you look at Mohar's claims, it couldn't have been carved in the position it's in now because of I think it's got to do with the way you can see the tooling on the
Right.
actual stone. It was done while it was horizontal. So, the Baron, what's his name? Baron Karl von Drey, the German civil servant known for inventing the bicycle in 1817, will be rolling in his grave because he was beaten by an Indian guy thousands of years ago. And Russian drills as well comes up. In 2018, there was a rare specimen of 40,000-year-old jewelry that was discovered in eastern Russia. And Atlantis Rising magazine reported on this. There was an artificial hole in this chlorite bracelet that, based on experts' analysis, it would have required a high-speed drill to create.
Which obviously wouldn't have existed thousands of years ago, or shouldn't have from our scientific perspective.
Well, this thing's 40,000 years old.
Wow. Incredible.
How do you have a high-speed drill 40,000 years ago? So basically he breaks down these examples into two fundamental categories. So essentially there's the discoveries, the inventions that are ahead of their time, and then there's those that are ahead of our time.
Mm.
So from the first category, you'd have things like, the bicycle in the 7th century, the Ice Age bracelet made with a power tool. But there's more examples that the modern world hasn't even invented yet.
Right.
Those are the ones that I'm interested in. The achievements of the ancient world that just, we have no idea how they did it. Absolutely no idea. Our technology cannot do it. So chapter 1 was so much fun. It's on automation, and you wouldn't think there'd be much material here. Like you would think, well, how much could the ancients actually automate with, ropes and pulleys? But I was surprised at how much Chinese sex robots come up in this first chapter. But we'll get to those. So sometime before 70 CE, in the Pneumatica and Automata, these were two books authored by Heron of Alexandria, Heron built a programmable self-propelled cart that was apparently powered by a falling weight. Remember, this is 2,000 years ago. And he was very ingenious in terms of stage plays. He invented all these mechanics and automatons for stage productions.
What do you mean? Like robots that would move or something on stage?
You know how, on some kind of Broadway play or something, you have, props that move and things that come from behind the curtain, things that come down. He would automate all that stuff.
Right.
He had these 3-wheeled special effects platforms that would carry robots onto the stage, and the robots would perform for the audiences. Now, apparently this contraption was powered by a binary-like system of ropes and knots that was operated by these cogwheels. And, they give an example of how it worked, but there's comments from Noel Sharkey, this computer scientist at the University of Sheffield in the UK, who says the control system is basically the precursor to modern-day binary programming, the way that you organize it.
Yeah.
So the idea was he could set a certain procedure to take place.
Yeah,
the program to run once these things got on the stage. And then you have, moving to China, you've got Han Zheli. He was between 806 and 820 CE. He was a Japanese inventor who eventually moved to the Chinese court because his inventions were so amazing. He made mechanical birds, phoenixes, cranes, crows, and magpies. Most of them were built out of wood with some metal parts. But he made these prototypes that apparently, according to the written records, they could eat, drink, and sing like regular birds.
Yeah, come to think of it, I've heard of ancient Chinese stories about these sorts of, when I say ancient, like older Chinese stories about these things, of where the emperor would have this pet, but it'd be a mechanized bird.
Oh, yeah, that's a famous story.
Yeah.
The story, the emperor had, was it a lark or some kind of, some kind of singing bird that would come to his window every day, and he would feed it. It was like his friend.
Yeah.
And one day, this inventor, like the Japanese guy from this story, Han Zheli, he made a mechanical bird for the emperor. And the emperor was so enamored with this mechanical bird, he just played with it every day like some kid. He forgot about the real bird that was coming to his window every day and eating seeds and drinking and singing for him. And eventually he went back to his window and he realized the bird had stopped coming. And according to the story from my memory...
What's the moral of that story?
Well, it's interesting because Joseph actually goes into this. It's like it also applies in modern times.
Yeah.
Putting material things ahead of the
Nature.
reality, nature and spiritual things. But basically, the emperor got so sad that his real friend had gone and wasn't coming back. He was on his deathbed. He was dying of sadness, and as he was about to succumb to this grief, according to the story, the little singing bird, the real one, flew in through the window, landed on his chest, and he was so happy he regained his strength and went on to lead the empire
And smash the mechanical bird.
and destroyed the mechanical bird, the evil mechanical bird. But it's funny you brought that up because that's kind of like a metaphor that you hear from these stories. It can be applied to modern times as well. And Joseph kind of speculates, did they have the same problems that we have today where they started to rely too much on mechanistic things?
Exactly. It's really funny because that's the same thing that came up when I was looking at these parts. It was essentially that every society we seem to, and I don't know why, if it's because we're human beings and our brains are structured a certain way that ultimately we do understand mathematics in the same way, so the same inventions come about over many millennia, but ultimately it always leads to this destruction in the end. And it's like this warning that we have that exactly the same thing will happen to humanity if we keep going.
He made a mechanical cat as well.
To get the mechanical bird?
I don't know. But what I find bizarre is they had a name for cybernetics in the 1st century called Kwai Shi. And Andrew Thomas, a well-known Russian-born investigator, Joseph writes, he investigates ancient technology. He said this Kwai Shi was like an art by means of which a statue was brought to life to serve its maker. And reading through some of these examples, I'm just scratching my head. I mean, I'm no engineer, but I'm wondering how they would do this. There's an early example of a wooden humanoid that would sit atop this robotic cart. It was developed by Zhang Heng in the 1st century.
Is this the cuck machine?
And this is not, I'll let you know when we get to the
good.
cuck machine.
Because anything you've described so far technically could be a cuck machine.
How?
We'll leave it up to your
Explain
imagination.
yourself. You talking about the mechanical cat?
Well, we're not going there, okay.
That this thing would come out and it would pound a drum. It was on some kind of self-propelled vehicle, and it would just start traveling, like this automated car, and it would strike a bell whenever it would pass a certain distance. Like if it went a mile and a half, it would strike this bell. It was like this weird automated measuring machine.
But is it self-driving?
Yeah, it's totally automated, apparently, according to the descriptions in the text.
But what was the purpose of it?
I have no idea.
Isn't that weird?
Like a measuring machine?
Yeah.
I don't know. Another humanoid was fashioned into the likeness of a Buddhist monk by an early Tang dynasty craftsman in 620 CE. This is Yang Wulian. He made this thing beg for alms, which were deposited in a copper bowl.
It's a cash.
Yeah, and when the bowl was full, this robot would bow, and then it would tip forward the bowl, and all the coins would fall into this little treasure chest. And I swear I've seen one of those in a Chinese restaurant. Like it's that little cat thing.
Yeah. No, you mean a Manani Neko or whatever it is?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Similar thing. Like you've seen things like that.
Yeah.
Like when you go to Tokyo, they've got those little things that you put the coin on the shelf and the cat comes and puts it in the box.
The money box
It's
thing.
like that kind of thing. You're filling out the bowl and then it's putting the alms in its little treasure chest. All of that stuff sounds kind of reasonable. Like you can imagine how there'll be some mechanism that you pull or something that would make that work. But there's other ones that just make you wonder how it would work. So according to researchers, there's the Yin Wenliang, a late 5th century mechanical engineer from Lozhou. He created a wooden man, dressed him with an outfit made of silk, and apparently at every banquet, this small wooden man would propose a toast to each guest in order. The creator, Wen Liang, also made a wooden woman. She could play the ancient Chinese pipe, the sheng, and she could sing, and she could do it in perfect rhythm. If a guest did not finish the wine in his cup, the wooden robot wouldn't refill the cup. If a guest did not drink enough wine, the wooden singing girl would play the Chinese pipe and sing for him to urge him to drink more.
So let's just break this down for a second.
Think about the engineering.
Exactly. I mean, even with the robots that we have now, I don't think they've got really, without advanced robotics, the capabilities of doing that. So you're going to have sensors that would be able to work out whether or not you still have a liquid in your glass.
Yeah.
You have to have some type of material that would allow for the replication of either a speaker or some vocal cord material. Like, the level of technology involved here is mind-blowing.
I'll tell you what this is. Remember there was that robotics conference in Russia and they announced their new humanoid bipedal robot and it was just a guy in a suit?
Yes, yeah, good point.
That's what this is.
Yeah, right.
They just get two midgets and they make them wear like wooden Iron Man suits and they get them to go and do robotic movements.
Honestly sounds more logical.
And this Chinese guy's like, look at my inventions, Emperor.
And it was ancient times, so people will be like, oh, wow, that's an incredible robot.
And they're all drunk too. It's at a banquet. Like you wait till everyone's 20 sakis in or whatever. And then you bring
the robot.
You bring out your robots. And everyone's like, oh, this is amazing.
I'm going to go with that theory.
Yeah.
I think that works.
So you might like this because we were talking about new technology in the office just between ourselves today, and I was getting excited about new cars coming out. And then Aaron sends me this link. He's like, check this out. You've got to see how cool this is. And it's an automated ironing machine from Samsung.
It's so cool.
Why do you get excited about that?
You have no idea how much I hate ironing. I absolutely despise it. No one in my home does it, so I have to do it. Not that it should be anyone's role, but still, I hate it. So this thing, it's a cupboard. You put it in your closet, you integrate it, and all you do is you hang up your shirts, and then you press a button, and it steams them, and it cleans them.
Dude, it only does 4 shirts at a time.
That's enough.
It would take 3 days of standing there and steaming your shirts and putting them back in to get it all done. And
I imagine it's probably not very environmentally friendly either. So I particularly want it so I could just be like, every time I open it, how dare you?
Well, you would love this invention from Da Feng Ma. He was this really skilled designer, and he actually constructed an automated dresser for the Empress. So whenever the Empress, she would open this full-length mirror in her chambers, right? And this robot female would bring out like washing paraphernalia, and she would have towels, and say the Empress removed one of the towels, this would trigger the robot to roll back on its mechanism and go back into the closet, and the mirror would close over it. It's totally automated. So it must have had some kind of pressure sensor that triggered something to get it to move. It's really cool.
Or a midget inside pulling levers.
Again, it was probably a midget dressed up as a robot who had to just stay in that cupboard all day.
Yeah. That's why only the rich could afford them. There's a limited supply.
There was another mechanical domestic that was commissioned by Ta Chuan. His wife was really impressed by this well-endowed male robot he had created. Now, this creation was programmed to erotically service her when the emperor was away on state business. He eventually learned of the empress's bionic infidelity. This is the emperor found out, and destroyed the cuckolding automaton. He had its inventor beheaded.
Oh, that's not...
Isn't that cruel?
Ooh, that is pretty cruel.
Like, imagine what you do. You're this kind of Doc Brown of ancient China. You've got all these crazy inventions, and the empress comes to you. You know, you're prostrated in front of her, and she was like, I would like a Cuckamaton. You will be handsomely rewarded. And he's just got to say, your wish is my... is
it just a dildo on a stick? Is that what it ends up being? I mean...
It was a midget in a suit.
With a broom.
With a big wooden dildo. But this wasn't the first sex robot from history. Now, more than 600 years earlier, Nabis, Sparta's monarch who ruled from 207 to 192 BCE, invented a lifelike reproduction of his famously beautiful wife after her death. Now, he actually concealed this from public knowledge. This was like a state secret that he had this...
Pervbot.
Yeah, some kind of fembot in his king's chambers. Now, amazingly though, they actually used this device for very practical applications. So they would dress her in regal robes, and apparently, according to the writings, this replica was a mirror image of the deceased queen. Now, it was controlled from a concealed nearby location by the king himself through hidden devices. So he literally had, like a joystick and levers and pulleys. And whenever there was an enemy of the state, whenever one of the king's debtors, for example, there was someone who, like a deadbeat borrower, owed the kingdom money, the king would basically invite them to this lavish banquet. and ply them with wine, get them really drunk. And then they would show them to their chambers. Now, in the chambers and it would all be dark. You got to picture it. The guy's drunk,
dark.
There's candlelight everywhere. And in the corner is this kind of just the outline of this beautiful mistress, right? And so what the robot would kind of open its arms and maybe spread its legs a little bit.
Just lift its dress.
And the dead would be like, all right, it's time for some action. And essentially, this is how Joseph wrote it. As soon as the target entered her, she would spring shut.
Oh, it's like a mousetrap.
Yeah. It's like those stories of, you hear the headlines like man from Florida gets his dick stuck in a spa jet.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like one of those stories.
Well, it's more, it's predatory though. I mean, what does it take it off? Or does it just trap it?
No, he's just kind of trapped in there and her arms come around and apparently there was iron nails that would come out of her arms.
That's particularly cruel.
And just, he would be trapped there with no escape. And then the king would come out and be, ha ha, sex with my wife. Or, he would basically just torture the guy until he would pay his debts or, give information or whatever they wanted.
I get the information, but it's kind of hard to pay your debts when you're stark naked with your dick stuck in a mousetrap, essentially.
Well, you are at the mercy of your captors, really. I mean,
so you have to question, again, like, are these just stories that have been blown out of proportion? I mean, is it possible that, come on, even if you're that drunk, are you going to put your dick into a weird wooden contraption that's got a silk dress on?
Yeah. Haven't you seen the offbeat headlines of the last 20 years? Man has sex with tree. Man has sex with park bench.
But that's all because, it's not because they're drunk, it's just because it's weird perversions. But, even if you're that drunk, you're not going to go and have sex with a bedside table, are you?
I think that's a testament to how remarkable the inventions were.
Yes.
Because you're right. You're not going to have sex with a piece of wood in the corner of the king's chambers.
With a bit of silk draped over it.
Yeah. Just that they put a wig on it and a bit of lipstick. It's just a log with lipstick on it. No, it had to be convincing. And this is a testament to the artistry and the ingenious inventions of the ancient times.
Does he mention if there are any drawings or any type of schematics that are remaining of these things, or is it just the stories?
Some of them do. So the ancient Greeks that did the automatons for drama, for plays, stage props, some of those have actually been recreated, but there's not much left behind.
No sex robots left.
No, there's no schematics of sex robots, unfortunately.
But
again, with a lot of this stuff, you can always go back to an earlier example. And as we've seen from our research on other ancient history topics, the further you go back, the more advanced things are. It's not that things get more advanced as we increase to the modern age.
No, it's this, it's really, kind of a paradox, because you think you've got to go forward for technology to advance, but you find that it actually becomes more advanced as you go back.
So 1,000 years before, during the Trojan War, or in that time period, there was the widow Laodamia, and she made a bronze likeness of her husband after he passed away. She put him in a room, and essentially the idea was that she was going to do these sacred rites in front of the gods, devote herself to this effigy of him, to, maybe to guide him through the underworld. At least that's what she told everyone. Until one day, this is according to Gaius Julius Hyginus, a servant was bringing her something and he just looked through the crack of the door because she wasn't, she basically wasn't responding to anything he said.
Right.
And he just cracks open the door and all he sees is...
Well, where do you want to go, love?
Yeah, can make us an offer. But in my model agency, we have...
Are you a fucking taxi driver? I'm thinking you ain't no taxi driver.
I knew that clip. I knew that accidentally saved clip of the fake taxi porn video that somehow is in our soundboard would occasionally come in handy.
It's in our soundboard because it's a year ago now when we first moved up here. I started seeing fake taxi everywhere. I'm like, what the hell's fake taxi? I look it up. I'm like, oh, well, okay.
The servant basically cracked open the door and it was like a dirty porno in there.
What is there? Is it a robot in a fake taxi? I mean, what's going on?
She was basically having sex with the effigy of her husband. And because it was dark in there, the servant thought there was a lover who had snuck in, right? So her father, the servant went and told her father. So her father, who I presume was, the king, he bursts in. Can you imagine this?
Oh, yeah, the
my
horror.
God.
Oh, embarrassment.
Sees his daughter, with
Getting some copper or brass.
getting
brassed.
brassed by this automaton. And he wants to put an end to her torture. So he basically says, enough of this. And he builds this big pyre and lights it on fire and throws the automaton of her husband on, and it burns up in the flames. Now, she is so attached to her lifelike dildo, she throws herself into the fire and dies.
Well, that's not funny.
No, it's not, Aaron. None of this is fun. This whole segment is not meant to be funny. I don't know why you're laughing at any of this. And that brings us to the automated Chinese pleasure pool, which is actually not what you think. This is Ling Zhao's, his mid-6th century robots. They were really remarkable for their lifelike appearance, especially their skin and hair, and skin texture and hair apparently was really lifelike.
What would they make it out of?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. All we have is the reports of people saying, you could go up to this thing, and if it was the right lighting, you would be like, that really looks like a real person sitting there. A court historian, Ming Xin, told of how the Qi dynasty monk from northern China dug a pleasure pool at the base of a mountain. This was on the orders of Emperor Wu Cheng. After the pool was finished, Ling Zhao built a miniature boat with exquisite details and put it in the water. Now, when the miniature boat flowed before the emperor, he took a wine cup from it and the boat would stop automatically. Then the small wooden man on the boat would clap its hands, bow, and the boat would start playing music. When Emperor Wu Cheng would finish his drink, he would put it back down on the boat, and the small wooden man would go back inside, driving the boat, and the boat would go off to the other end of the pleasure pool.
So it's like an ancient sushi train essentially for wine.
Yes, isn't that cool?
It is pretty cool, but it's like decadence for the ultra rich. But the development of such things.
But again, I just keep thinking of all the little gears and how it's powered and how it like the pulleys and how it works.
Look, as complex as it sounds, though, I mean, if you look at the history of watchmaking, I mean, the miniaturization of watches, it's almost technologically defying. It's really fascinating stuff if you're into that kind of engineering stuff. So it's probably possible.
But again, you can go back to ancient Greece. You have an earlier example. There's the Greek Philon of Byzantium from the 3rd century BCE. He got the nickname Mechanicus because of his impressive engineering accomplishments. He invented an automaton in the form of a life-size woman. And in her right hand, she held a wine jug. And when a cup was placed in the palm of her left hand, she would automatically pour wine first and then water to achieve the right mix, because they used to mix wine and water. And apparently it was calculated to get this perfect mix. And here's the thing, and this is the origin of calling women's breasts jugs.
No.
Because the wine and the water were stored in metal jugs inside her chest.
I don't know if I believe that one. I'm not.
If you've ever wondered why you have a pair of nice jugs, that's where the term comes from.
Not so sure about that.
I don't know
one.
why you're not convinced. Where else would it come from?
Oh, I have no idea.
It comes from Mechanicus and the robot with jugs, where her tits would have been.
Okay, fine. I accept it. Fine.
Thank you. Aaron accepts it. Even more elaborate robotic inventions mentioned further back. Chapter 7 of the Old Testament repeats an ancient Egyptian myth describing the younger brother Osiris. His name was Raquel, and he lived before the Great Flood. Now, whenever you're going back before the Great Flood, this is where we can entertain stories of advanced civilizations who, had similar achievements or even greater achievements than our own. Now, Raquel, according to the story, erected an enormous sepulchre adorned with statues of various metals made by talismanic art, which move and spoke and acted like living men. Androids. That's androids.
But that's also then suggesting artificial intelligence. If it's able to, is it just a recording, which obviously, again, is more advanced because recording didn't exist? The descriptions of these things, is it just because the culture was just so it was backwards kind of.
Well, let me add another layer to that from the theosophical researcher David Regal. He writes in an account of the sinking of Atlantis, taken from a secret commentary given by H.P. Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine. A kind of robot is mentioned. It is there called a speaking animal, he says, or a speaking beast. And in a footnote, Blavatsky actually reports that according to the accounts, these were artificially made beasts. These were mechanical animals. Now, according to Blavatsky, and according to, her source was allegedly Brahmacari Barwa, which was a 19th century Hindu scholar, there's apparently Sanskrit texts that describe these subjects, but most of them have been lost to time, right? Now, there is an existing Pali text called the Description of the World that is allegedly based on these lost texts. And in that, it describes a robot. It uses the words Bhuta Vahana Yanta. The translation is literally elemental vehicle machine. Now, these elemental-driven machines in the account are used to protect the relics of Buddha. So
they're guards.
They're guards. It's kind of like
drones.
Well, that's a more modern description of perhaps an ancient technology.
Yeah,
but there's no. It's not like some magical creature. It's literally described as a machine. It's a mechanical thing. It's a robot. So if you can, stretch your imagination to think that there's a possibility there were advanced civilizations that were obliterated in global disasters, then why not?
Of course,
have automations, especially if they were able to achieve things greater than our own civilization.
Yeah,
absolutely. Unless it was just midgets in a suit,
again,
pretending to be
get
robots.
locked in tombs.
And the final example here is. Well, actually, this is the second last one. This is, the famous story of Jason and his quest for the Golden Fleece in Argonautica. And this is, of course, Talos, the robotic guard. When Jason and his Argonaut followers approach the island of Crete by boat, they're bombarded by boulders hurled at them by a bronze warrior programmed to protect the Aegean island from all outsiders. So if you know the story, the Argonauts, they overcome the giant opponent. I think it's Jason's fiancée, Medea, who ends up taking down the beast. She, according to the story, she pulls a bronze nail out of the automaton's heel, and out gushes this fluid known as ichor. And it's like the blood of the gods. It's draining its vital fluid from this robot Talos, and it collapses in this heap of lifeless metal. Now, popular electronics reporter William Tenn says that single vein could have been his main power cable, or a fuse was pulled out or something. He describes Talos as a weapons alert system and guided missile in one package. Now, scholars will say that this tale is like a metaphor for the advanced technology of Bronze Age superiority.
Yes.
Right? It's later scholars looking back on the Bronze Age saying, look how advanced they were before it all collapsed. However, there is an argument that the author of the Argonautica was basically using an already known story and
from all the times.
Yeah, rehashed it. The story was already known. So there's an argument that can be made that because the story was already known, it was based on a much, much, much earlier historical account, perhaps during a time of an advanced civilization. You can throw the word Atlantis out there, for example. So I like these ideas that there were these possibilities of advanced mechanisms in ancient times. But then if you go into some of the Egyptian texts, it just goes complete sci-fi.
No, it does.
I mean, this is
even with electricity.
Before we even touch the Mahabharata and the weapons of mass destruction there. But if there's this early Egyptian story that tells of Nubia's humanoid commando unit sent to abduct the pharaoh. After his return to Egypt, the pharaoh dispatches his own robotic SWAT team to retaliate by kidnapping the Nubian king. And during the course of their man versus android confrontations, there's flamethrowers used, there's plasma weapons deployed. So this is all in the tale of Say Al-Sar, which Joseph points out is pretty much like a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
Like it's like a modern movie. But all good science fiction, he says, must be based, at least in part, on science that's familiar to audiences. Otherwise,
It's just too abstract.
how would it work?
Yeah.
So he says, what generally recognizable science could ordinary Egyptians have taken for granted 5,000 years ago that would have been necessary for making the tale of Seasaw credible?
I have to find it for you. I realized that I was just looking through my notes here. But what I was doing for some of my Egyptian research is I came across this story about ancient Egyptian moving statues. And I kind of glossed over it at the time because I went, oh, well, who cares? But I just happened to be looking through it earlier. And the story goes, and I will dig this up now because now that you've mentioned it, I think we should go into it. But essentially it was that there were these statues in Egypt and a special fluid was placed inside them. And this fluid, when placed inside, actually provided some sort of power source. It didn't lubricate it. It was a power source that allowed these statues to move inside the tombs and also in aristocracy's homes because it was obviously something that was, very desirable because look at this latest technological fad. It's really fascinating stuff. And it was just readily accepted that technology existed back then. Something that in modern society, we're like, well, that's even impossible.
It's funny you say that because we're going to be going into some of the claims of Egyptian piezoelectricity and how it was actually used to power machining tools.
Yeah.
There's some really fascinating stuff coming up. Let's take a break here, and when we come back, we'll go into all that good stuff. Actually, let me leave you with a final note from this chapter from Frank Joseph. He says, while our modern world is relearning some of the old secrets of these inventors, Philon of Byzantium or Ling Zhao of China, he says we might do better to first understand how and why their civilizations were lost. He says all these robotic creations vanished with the 5th century collapse of Greco-Roman civilization, followed some 400 years later with the gradual onset of China's own Dark Ages. Again, this idea that inventions are always just reinventions of a greater past. Again, let's take a break here. When we come back, we've got more ancient high tech. You're listening to Mysterious Universe. Stay with us. Now we're back with Ancient High Tech, the new book from Frank Joseph. Just going through some of my favorite selections from his chapters here. He has a great quote from David Hatcher Childress from Technology of the Gods, which came out in the year 2000, where Childress wrote, all ancient Chinese texts were ordered destroyed in 212 BC by Emperor Qi Huangdi. Vast amounts of ancient texts, virtually everything pertaining to history, philosophy, and science were seized and burnt. Whole libraries, including the Royal Library, were destroyed. All books in the Byzantine Empire during the mid-5th century were ordered destroyed, except for a newly edited version of the Bible. The library at Alexandria was destroyed at this time, and the great mathematician and philosopher Hypatia was dragged from a chariot by a mob and torn to pieces. The mob went on to burn the library. Thus, the suppression of science and knowledge, particularly of the ancient past, began in earnest. Funny how the mob is usually
cycles
at the root of a lot of this destruction and the loss and
of great knowledge.
The loss of knowledge and how we forget these ancient inventions. So one of the things I wanted to mention from Egypt was the Saqqara bird. This one's really famous. I might send you the photo of this to put in the show notes, Aaron, and I think you'll recognize it immediately. This one was discovered in Saqqara's Step Pyramid in 1898. And it's this small, pretty unassuming artifact. At first glance, there's really kind of nothing special about it. It's basically,
Oh, yes, I see it. Yep.
it looks like a bird, right? And when they saw it, they catalogued it in the Museum of Antiquities in Cairo, and it basically sat in a drawer for 70 years until an archaeologist came along. His name was Dawood Masiha. And as soon as he looked at this bird-like carving, item number 33109, he realized that this wasn't a bird. It kind of has a face like a bird, but this is not a bird. Now, people that have seen this have said, oh, it's some kind of boomerang or it's a boat for religious ceremonies. Some have even suggested a weather vane. But since this archaeologist, Masiha, he was a member of the Egyptian Aeromodelers Club. And because of his knowledge of model planes, he looked at this immediately and realized it's a plane.
Oh, is it a glider?
It's a glider. It's not a bird at all. Now, the researcher Joseph Jockman writes that we can immediately see, just by looking at it, that it bears an uncanny resemblance to a glider craft of some type. The only markings on it are faint eyes painted on the nose and 2 red lines under the wings, in a similar fashion that decorations appear on modern aircraft. He says the eye dots are actually the ends of a very small obsidian bar, which is fitted through the head and gives the craft a really important balancing weight. The model's wings are straight and aerodynamically shaped. Now, the Egyptian archaeologist Masiha, he also found evidence for a tail wing piece that had likely been attached to the vertical tail, just like a modern plane. Now, there was an interview with him in the London Times where he said, look, the tail is really the most interesting thing that distinguishes this model from all others that have been discovered. No bird can produce such a contortion at the rear of its body to assume anything that looks like this model. And of course, it's radically different from any other ancient Egyptian statues of birds. It's just completely different. So he's convinced it's a glider. Now, after its discovery in 1969, Egypt's Minister for Culture commissioned a technical research group to put other birds under the microscope. And since then, there's been all these replicas made of this Saqqara bird glider. And apparently there was a team that in 2007, they worked with an aerodynamics expert, Simon Sanderson, and they used the University of Liverpool's computer system to create a 3D profile and start to replicate precise models, 5 times larger than this little ancient Egyptian thing. They then took it to wind tunnel testing and aeronautics research institutes to figure out if it actually had any aerodynamic properties. And it did. It had, I think it was a factor of lift, like 5 times its body weight. So even the model itself, they would make, small ones that were exact same size. You could just flick it with your wrist and it would keep flying. So he was saying modern technology has proved beyond a doubt that this thing flew. Masiha told the researcher Jockmans that the model from the tomb was an artist's impression of something much larger that he had seen up close when he was alive. A full-scale version of the plane could have flown carrying heavy loads, but at low speeds, between 45 and 65 miles per hour. Simply by using the rising heat currents of the Egyptian deserts, he said, on either side of the Nile, such a craft would have been able to stay in the air indefinitely with some skilled maneuvering. So he points out that the ancient Egyptians, they built scale models of basically everything they were familiar with. There was always like a little model of it. Model temples, model ships, model chariots, and now model planes. So Masiha believes that somewhere under the desert there, somewhere in Egypt, there's maybe a buried glider out there that hasn't been uncovered yet.
Wow, that would be incredible if that was found. But then why haven't they found landing strips or even the equivalent of a runway somewhere?
Well, I mean, how would a runway survive?
Well, I'm wondering
Just be covered with sand.
Well, it would be covered with sand.
It'd be gone.
Surely with all the digging they may have found something.
A runway, if you think about it, would be the first thing to go.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's just
maybe,
paved.
Well, that's the thing as well. Maybe it's just being interpreted as being a road.
Well, it gets interesting when they start to ask the question of how old this thing is. It was found in this excavation for one of the wives of Pharaoh Titi, Queen Kuit. Mm-hmm. But they point out that it might actually be from an older period because the tombs of royal dignitaries were actually reused. Sometimes they would go in 500 times, 1,000 years later and say, well, it's time to get rid of the old ones and put in some new dead people. Now, the biggest clue comes from an inscription that's on the tail. It says the gift of Amun. Now, Amun was an Egyptian deity associated with the wind, but this inscription is a clue because the god was known only as Amun before 1650 BCE. After that, you always had the hyphen, Amun-Ra. There was always a hyphen Ra on the end of it. Amun was the chief immortal of the 6th dynasty, which is likely when this bird was fashioned or this glider was fashioned. And it didn't appear to have survived the end of the Old Kingdom, which was followed by a prolonged period of chaos in which many of the early pharaonic civilization's highest achievements were lost. So again, we have this example of possibly an advanced technology. Because Egypt, the existence of the Egyptian empire is so long.
Well, it existed for 3,000 years, something like that.
You have longer than that if you include the king's lists.
Yes.
You have rises and falls and rises and falls. So it looks like there was, like a golden age. And then the mob came along.
Always the mob.
And started burning everything.
Yep.
And then they forgot how to build planes. No one had any planes anymore. It was like the Green New Deal. Planes were banned. So yet again, something from the past, highly advanced, and after that it's destroyed and the technology is forgotten. Now, later, Frank Joseph looks at major medical achievements from the past. He points out that the Indian texts discuss vaccines. Mm-hmm. So the English physician Edward Jenner, today considered the founder of immunology, he inoculated a 13-year-old boy successfully against smallpox. That's way back in 1796. So that's our baseline, our modern understanding of when immunology, vaccination started.
Hang on, that young boy, by the way, I think because he used cowpox and he wasn't sure it was going to work, but I think it was his son. So it wasn't just using a young boy, he used his son.
Well, he's probably desperate to save his son's life. Incredible achievement. None of this is taking away from the incredible achievements because it's not like he stole the information. He just figured it out again.
Yeah, exactly.
It just means he wasn't the first because history forgot India's Sakya Grantham. This was a Brahmin medical text composed in Sanskrit circa 1500 BCE, and this was a description in the text. Take on the tip of a knife the contents of the inflammation, inject it into the arm of a man, mixing it with the blood. A fever will follow, but the malady will pass very easily and will create no complications.
You're right. This is exactly what Jenner did. And I was wrong, by the way. It wasn't his son. It was his gardener's son. So even worse. But you're right. He took the pus of basically someone who was infected with cowpox and transferred it. And that provided him with immunity to smallpox.
So that translation we have where you take on the tip of a knife might be the only English word to accommodate an untranslatable Sanskrit term, which might mean hypodermic needle or something. Joseph has a bunch of examples, ancient Greece, that's where the term syringe comes from. It's like a Greek term.
Right.
There's Incan examples, there's Peruvian, Bolivian examples where they used hypodermic injections through hollowed out, sharpened bird bones. This is like 1400 CE.
What, for vaccinations or just for delivering drugs of some kind?
The Greeks would use a brass syringe to perform cataract surgery.
Oh, okay.
And there's records for that. For the South Americans, I don't know. There's only a description of using a skin bladder filled with something. Mm-hmm. But it was basically an injection. It could have been a vaccination. So it took more than 12 centuries before syringes were used again for hypodermic purposes, thanks to the Scottish physician Alexander Wood in 1853. So it's almost like you can look at history in terms of technological inventions as a sine wave, where they all get invented, then the mob comes, and then they decline, and it's just all forgotten for a huge length of time. Then it comes back.
Yeah.
All the inventions again, and then the mob comes, and it's all forgotten.
But what is it about that, though? I understand that, the universe essentially moves in cycles, and so does human development, but what is it about us that we seem to lose technologies and then find them? It's like this universal kind of, I guess it makes sense, like there's this universal truth of some kind, I suppose, or knowledge, then we forget it and remember it.
I do like the idea that there's a kind of cosmic climate where you could sense that inventors would have the ideas of these fantastical machines. Like you can look at Leonardo's sketches, for example. You know, he's sketching helicopters and tanks and all sorts of things in the 1400s or whenever it was. But it's not the right cosmic climate for those inventions to come to fruition.
Yes, yeah. I like that idea.
It needs to be the right time. It needs to be the right environment. We spoke about that on a previous segment. Remember, we were covering Shakespeare's plays,
yes,
and how successful his writing was because all his competitors had died from the plague. It's like it's the
one
right
way to make good business,
just the right time. It was the right cosmic climate for Shakespeare's works to take on the popularity they did, or eventually did.
That's where maybe becoming a little bit more out there and conspiratorial. But this is where I wonder if things are different this time, because we talk about these civilizations, these potentially far more advanced civilizations, and then the technology takes off and it destroys them, or the mob comes and it's lost and then it comes back again. But I wonder if it's different with us, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing. You know, there's some speculation, we've only been talking about on recent shows about recovered technologies from alien spacecraft and how that may have actually given birth to the modern computing age. The reason why you're listening to this right now is not because of human discoveries, but because of reverse engineering. I wonder if that could potentially, if this is the first time in history that it's happened, I mean, let's ignore the possibility of ancient aliens, although that may have happened as well. But is it possible now that that's going to accelerate us into a worse path of destruction because we're just not meant to have it? We're not. It's like you're talking about the environment being right. Well, if it's an alien technology, the environment will never be right.
Well, you're opening up a whole can of worms there.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's a terrifying concept.
I mean, the answer to your original question of why do things disappear, it's because you need the foundation of an advanced civilization for complicated, complex machinery and inventions to emerge.
Yes.
I mean, just take a look under the hood of your car and look at all the little components and think about
how the smallest of components.
Think about just the one little thing that went through hundreds, maybe not hundreds of years, but decades of refinement and advancement through testing and prototypes and trying it and trying a better one and competition between different manufacturers to come to this little thing that does that specific job. Now, without an advanced civilization, without enough people with that knowledge behind that, you're just going back to square one. Yeah. And even if you've got all that knowledge in your mind, even if you know how to build a Cadillac from scratch, if you don't have the support of the rest of your fellow man, then how's it going to get made?
So you're saying it takes a village. And, extrapolating that, I thought about it, right? I thought about this loss. Like, when we think about the destructions of ancient civilizations that may have been really advanced, I mean, Atlantis is a really good example. Like, if Atlantis really did existed, the stories go that they became so advanced and they became so debaucherous and
well, they're having sex with dinosaurs. We know that.
Exactly. I mean, it just became
that's been established.
It became so filthy and debaucherous that essentially their technology destroyed them. But it doesn't actually have to be that exotic. It doesn't have to be that extreme. Think about it. I mean, if it takes a village to have that collective knowledge to be able to create these technologies, you simply just have to have a couple of famines and a couple of environmental disasters, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah.
The knowledge is gone. Like, it's a complete breakdown. It doesn't have to be this really exotic destruction.
There's tons of examples here from metallurgy.
Oh, yes.
From the Viking swords, and the Roman cement is another. We still can't figure out how Roman cement was so good.
Yeah, Roman cement's amazing. Was it the Ulfbert sword as well? That incredible sword that seemed to have this resistance to any type of cracking or
yeah, and that was amazing because
strength.
Those swords from the Viking era, it's like he had a trademark, but he kept his technology secret from his competitors. So those swords all had, I know it's not Ulfric, but it's similar, right? It's stamped on every sword, and they've found a bunch of them throughout Scandinavia. And so the suggestion is that he had figured out a way to get his, furnaces hot enough, and he had figured out some metallurgical combination that no one else had figured out, and basically, patented it, kept it a secret. And even after he passed away, his name still lived on. It's like Henry Ford is dead, but we still have Ford today.
Yeah, he was the Scandinavian Hattori Hanzo, basically, for creating swords.
Yeah.
But it's such a shame because that technology, which would have incredible industrial applications today, is lost. It's not just swords. It's the material science, the metallurgy is lost.
Joseph had a great chapter, which I didn't take any notes on, so I'm a bit, sketchy on the details. But in Scotland, they've got those vitrified forts.
Oh, yes. Now, some of the theories I've heard about those is that they were hit by ancient nuclear weapons.
Yeah, there's all sorts
those sorts of crazy ideas.
There's all sorts of wild theories. But basically, they're stone forts where the stone has been melted. And immediately, the thing that stands out about them is they don't match any of the known historical building styles from the people that have lived in Scotland over, a vast length of time.
Yep.
And it's almost like they're just this out of place thing. And the big question, of course, is how does the stone melt? Because you need incredible temperatures. I think it's over 1,000 degrees Celsius or something to melt the rock. Now, a bunch of boffins came along and said, we've cracked it. We've figured out how they did it. What they basically did is they built this wooden scaffolding around the tower and then lit the scaffolding on fire, and that melted the rock. It got hot enough. So they actually did this. They built this huge scaffolding around one of the towers, and the Celtic towers, and they lit it on fire. And once it had actually burned hot enough to vitrify a couple of pebbles.
A couple of pebbles out of that massive tower.
Now, they took this as a great success, and they proved that you could vitrify stone from, burning this wood. But they used like 4 tons of wood.
Yeah, I seem to recall that experiment. And you're right. Yeah, the amount, and I remember that was the skepticism, is that the amount of material that they would have needed to vitrify the entire thing would have been almost implausible.
Well, there's something like 16 of these towers throughout the country. And someone did a calculation. You would need like half the forest in Europe to get enough wood to vitrify all the towers because, if you look at these towers, the whole thing is like this weird, smooth,
it's
almost glass-like material. And on top of that, there's also vitrification in, I can't remember where it is. I think it's some of the pyramids in Mexico where there's this clear vitrification of the stones. It's been clearly melted. Now, there's a clue from that part of the world because they have this relief, or it's a carving of this little guy. He's a man with a backpack on, and he's holding some device, and it's almost like he's abseiling down the side of one of the temples, right? And he's holding this device, and there's a big flame coming out of it.
So he's like got a flamethrower.
He's got some mega hot stone melting machine, and he's just swinging down almost like a window cleaner, and he's just cooking the side of the temple.
That sounds kind of like an application of Greek fire.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I do have the weapons coming up, but I was talking about the medical advancements from the ancient past. HCG, the hormone.
Yeah, it's for pregnancy. It's how you test.
Yeah, detecting pregnancies. Well, there was an Egyptian method where they would get a woman the woman who thinks she's pregnant, to urinate into a jar, and the jar would have barley and wheat grains. Now, they would keep that for 72 hours. And if they didn't sprout, she wasn't pregnant. But if it sprouted, she was clearly pregnant because the estrogen levels would cause the seeds to develop during that 3-day period. Now, growing barley indicated that the woman was pregnant with a male child, but wheat germination signaled the birth of a female child. And the Egyptians had a version of this too. The Carlsberg Papyrus from Egypt's classical age, 2040 BCE, had something similar, and they actually did a laboratory experiment more than 4,000 years later in 1963 that showed that the urine of pregnant women caused the grains to sprout at least 70% of the time. So it's been shown that this was quite an effective test.
Pretty accurate for the time.
And here's another example, because modern pregnancy testing, how old is that? Like 50, 60 years old?
Something like that, yeah. That's what it uses, HCG.
Yeah, now the Egyptians also had some awesome birth control techniques to prevent insemination.
Well, they used pigskin bladders, didn't they?
Crocodile dung, honey, and sodium carbonate combined in an acidic paste that was like a spermicidal paste.
Oh.
I would be worried about the smell.
You know where you wouldn't need to use that? Is if you bang one of the robots.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's an alternative method called for the woman to squat over boiling water filled with substances Egyptologists have so far been unable to identify.
So what, basically give yourself an Egyptian V-steam?
Well, yeah, it's a V-steam, but I don't know if it's prior or post-coitus.
Or during.
During. How would that work?
I don't know.
It would be weird if it was you had to do it before.
No,
Because, it's everything's getting hot and steamy and, everything's happening. It's progressing. You're at her place. You're right.
and it's like a steaming cave.
And she says, hang on a second, I just need to use the bathroom. And you just have a little peek through the door and she's sitting over this giant cauldron doing like a massive V-steam session.
And all you hear is, she hot!
Yeah. Now, here's another example because V-steaming has come back. We have covered on previous episodes of the show.
But it's come back in a terrible way.
Some members of the, particularly the African-American community.
Well, of the New Age community.
Very New Age African-American community. Very much enthusiastic about V-steaming. Not just before sex, just every day, giving it a good steam with various concoctions. We should do another segment on that. See how it's
been a while.
progressed.
We should see how it's progressed. Yeah, it's been a number of years now.
Is the industry surviving COVID-19?
All I can remember was the green smoothie poop. That's all I can recall from all those years ago.
Dude, there's this guy around here. My parents mentioned it the other day because they went to the markets near here and there was some stand advertising poop. And they were like, what?
As in manure?
What is this poo business you've got? And they were saying, oh no, it's about having a healthy gut. But their business is called Master Poo or something, right? And they were telling me about this, and I thought, what are you talking? Who would call their business like Poo Master? And the whole point is having the most healthy poos imaginable. And I went to get some Thai food the other night, and I was sitting down waiting for the order, and I picked up one of the local advertising magazines.
Yeah.
And I flipped open the page, and right in the middle is this huge advertisement for the local poo man.
I'm reluctant to look this up, but what did you say it was called? Poo Master.
I'll have to find it for you. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it has poo in the business name, right? And you read this banner in the ad, and it says, mastering your poo or having the greatest poo, right? And you just grossed out. Like, I'm waiting for my Thai food, just immediately grossed out by this business. And the image the guy uses who runs the business.
No.
He's sitting there and there's a big photo of him with one of those mason jars and he's drinking a smoothie. And I'm just like associating poo with him drinking from this weird brown smoothie jar. So immediately, if you just glance at it, you're just like, oh, that guy's drinking poo. This guy has started a business.
It brown, at least change the color.
This guy started a business where he makes poo smoothies, and this is the thing now. It's Clown World.
Look, it's 2020. Yeah. That's the problem, right? The reason why we haven't done any of these stories about green poo smoothies or V-steaming and that kind of stuff, because it used to be crazy.
Now it's just
2020.
normal.
Yeah, it's normal.
You can't tell anymore. Like, of course there's a guy drinking his own poo in a smoothie. It's 2020.
Not only that, there's people that are celebrating it.
I know.
That's the problem.
They're at the markets every Sunday. It must be good. Social distance, though. Drinking your own poo is fine, but social distancing.
You know what? We've been talking about the destruction of societies. This is where we're at. Like, we're losing technologies. And when people are drinking their own poo in advertisements, this is where we're at.
Yeah, so the Greeks had other ways to prevent pregnancy. They had prosthetic devices inserted into the vagina, and these would inject the essences of pomegranates and other plants with naturally high levels of estrogen. Now, apparently what this would do...
It's like an implement.
It would prevent the pituitary gland from producing the hormone that stimulates ovulation. So this is kind of the same principle as modern contraceptive pills.
Yeah.
Brad Steiger had a quote on this, actually. He said, it was only in very recent years that it was learned that acacia spikes contain a gum that is deadly to sperm. When the gum is dissolved in a fluid, its active constituent is lactic acid, a familiar ingredient in many modern contraceptive jellies. And of course, here's another example where it was, over 3,000 years later in the late 19th century that we had our version of this technology. It was reinvented, rediscovered. Now, the methods are different, but
the principles are the same.
Principles are the same, and it's the same effect. And there's tons of examples of surgical instruments as well from Mount Vesuvius, the Roman era, the destruction of Pompeii.
Well, everything was essentially carbonized, wasn't it? So they've got, when they pulled it up from archaeological digs.
Yeah, well, apparently they found these incredible instruments for gynecology. And the instruments had screws and there were, delicate manipulating devices. Now, apparently there was a quote from Scientific American who said they actually surpass today's instruments.
Again, incredible.
Yeah. So let's get to weapons of mass destruction because we like things that blow up. We spoke about weapons of mass destruction on the last episode. Update on that, actually. Did you see the news this morning that the Beidou Chinese satellite system is now completed?
I did. Yeah, and this is the thing. It's really funny that people are like, oh, we don't have to worry about it. We don't have to worry about it. It's like, no, you actually do have to worry about it because it's happening. Okay,
Yeah.
This isn't Red Scare. This is happening. It's actually in effect.
I was pretty proud of that we did that story last week.
Oh, we beat a whole heap of stuff.
And then the news just is full of the announcements that the Beidou Chinese satellite system is basically finished, fully operational. They don't have to rely on GPS.
Look, the future's pretty interesting because actually just by coincidence, after we did that show, I happened to be listening to a local radio station and I didn't catch the name of who it was, unfortunately. I was really annoyed because I caught it mid. But what this guy was saying, he was from a university here in Australia, was that China basically, the CCP, not China, the CCP is going to do something within the next 10 years. They've got to, if they want to launch a war to either recover the South China Sea or to, take over the world, whatever they want to do, they've got to do it in 10 years. If they don't do it in 10 years, their aging population will completely undermine their economy and it's done.
Well, they have a stated public goal to be the world superpower by 2050 because that's the 100-year anniversary of their party.
Right. Well, they've got 10 years. So let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Strap in.
Well, onto ancient weapons of mass destruction, you have the Hindu Artha Shastra, which is the science of politics, composed circa 2090 BCE, contains literally hundreds of recipes for creating poisonous weapons, toxic smoke, and other chemical weapons. And they have examples of mustard gas that were being used, 2,300 years before World War I. There's reports from 178 CE, the Chinese imperial troops had a soul-hunting fog. Credit to the Chinese. They have some freaking cool names for their weapons.
Yeah, the names, like Assassin's Mace.
The Assassin's Mace is pretty cool. And the soul-hunting fog, I mean,
well,
I'm already defeated. Yeah. If you're going to launch a soul-hunting fog on me, I'm worried.
I'm out.
I'll be okay with my mortal body dying, but this fog is hunting my soul.
What is it? Is it another mustard gas, chlorine gas?
It's arsenic somehow laced into the air, and they would release these clouds. They would use lime as well, and they used it against peasant revolts. It would just basically kill people if they got close to it. There's examples from a fortress city near today's Syria. This was in 256 CE. 19 of its Roman occupiers in this fort died within 2 minutes after their Persian enemies ignited bitumen and sulfur crystals and filled the tunnels where the legionnaires were burrowing, basically filled it with sulfur dioxide.
Oh, yeah. Rapid death.
Now, this was actually discovered in 2009, and archaeologists found, a bunch of dead Romans, but there was a lone Persian soldier down there. So there was
Was he the guy that had gone in to drop it in?
Yeah, he was the suicide bomber. So on to biological warfare. There's a great example here. 2,000 years ago, besieging forces were approaching the Mayan city in the Guatemalan highlands. And as they kind of came up this ridgeline, this is an old story that describes them seeing these, it looked like an enemy regiment. But as the army got closer, they realized that they were actually mannequins. They were like warriors wearing cloaks, spears, and shields, but their heads were dolls' heads. And that they had ears and nose and eyes painted on.
So it was used for intimidation.
Well, yeah, it was kind of like some mirage or a trick. So the commander of the army said, proceed, let's go. And as they got closer to these mannequins, they heard in the distance, "Release the bees!" And
these bees,
the heads exploded, and out of these mannequins came thousands of pissed off angry bees and hornets and yellow jackets. And
is that Oprah in the background just laughing?
Yeah, and stung the shit out of these soldiers. The way they popped them was they actually had a whole hive inside each mannequin, and then they would use these really accurate sling throwers to hit the heads and crack open the hives.
Yeah, the warfare stuff is really fascinating. I mean, as horrible as it is that these technologies are designed to kill people, The development is ingenious of these things, and it also leads to, obviously, it filters down from the military application to the civilian applications.
Yeah,
Still happens.
Well, there's a great story of Amesius, the strongholds of Amesius on the Black Sea. Again, it's like the enemy army was down in these tunnels, and they thought there's no way we can reach them until this ingenious general basically drilled down with these kind of, not even a tunnel, just drilled down like a pipe into the enemy tunnels, and once again released the bees.
Yep. Bees are the answer.
So you got to have some kind of bee division in an ancient army.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Is it that hard to obviously harvest bees? How would you maintain them?
I don't know. You'd have like beekeepers trained.
You'd have to.
Bee warfare.
Yeah.
Well, there's a good example with that with the war elephants. I was
From India?
I was going to mention, the famous story of Hannibal going over the Alps and attacking Rome from the north. And, no one thought it was possible because they thought, well, the Alps are just this impenetrable natural barrier. Hannibal was like, screw it, let's take our elephants through the snow. And he did it. It was one of the greatest, military strategies in history. But there's this great section from Joseph on, the tanks of the ancient world, which were the elephants. And it's fascinating to read about how they actually got to the point of having war elephants. It's not like you can just jump on an elephant and use it for warfare.
No.
Like, yes,
they're
big, but, they need to be trained. They need to be trained to not flee when they're scared. They need to follow commands. They need to learn certain maneuvers. They need to work together with other war elephants.
Does it include breeding? I mean, do you actually have to breed certain traits in them?
Yeah, so let me give you an example. So Hannibal was eventually defeated, I think it was, like a couple of years later by the Romans, because the Romans figured out how to defeat the war elephants. And it was basically, let's play the most annoying sounds ever, and this'll stop them. So they had these huge trumpets, because the war elephants were basically unstoppable. Like no one could take them out. And it was the ultimate weapon in this period of time. But they figured out if they blew these really shrill trumpets, the elephants would disperse. They couldn't be controlled. But because this is warfare, the elephant riders went back to the drawing board, and they actually trained the elephants. They raised elephants, bred elephants that were immune to shrill trumpets.
Yeah, so that accustomed them to it by obviously doing it to them, and then they'll get used to it.
So then you have this new generation of war elephants that can't be hurt by that weapon. So the Romans next, they tried like bacon missiles, I would call them.
Bacon missile?
Yeah, they realized the trumpets weren't working, and they saw, the war elephants lining up, like imagine 10 of them in a row. So what they did, and it's pretty horrible actually, is they would smear pigs with oil. They would light the pigs on fire and then hope that the pigs would run towards the elephants and the elephants would be distracted. But it actually says in the ancient texts that it was impossible to aim with precision.
That's
pigs. I'm like, really?
Yeah. Animals have never really worked in warfare.
How many tests did you have to do to realize that a pig that's on fire is not a precision strike? Like, it's never going to work. So there's tons of stories like that. There's great stories of naval forces that felt they were superior. They had better technology, greater numbers, but the opposing navy literally had catapults that were firing poisonous snakes onto their boats. And they ended up winning.
Well, I mean, there's a bit of competition with the bees now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like some ancient Samuel L. Jackson. Like, why all these mother effing snakes on my 2nd century Byzantine warship?
Irritating.
Yeah. So there's tons of great stories, tons of great warfare stories. There's all the examples of the Chinese using missiles. They had these bamboo missiles. There's this famous battle in history, I think it was 1500 CE, where 2,000 rockets were fired from 10 Imperial Chinese Navy warships, plus the 4,760 rockets launched by Chinese infantry and cavalry units. Hundreds of them found their mark in one of the largest battles of its kind in history. Imagine seeing that.
Yeah.
6,760 rockets fired in a single battle. And Joseph eventually gets to this skull that was found. And here's an example of these mysteries that just push back human existence. There was a skull that's on display in Moscow's Paleontological Museum, and the remains were found in the west of Russia's Lena River. And inside this skull, there's a small perforation in the forehead. And the skull's from an auroch, which is an extinct kind of buffalo creature. No, it's like a buffalo.
Oh.
And the museum curator noticed how the hole, it looks perfectly polished. It doesn't look like a spear or a rocket from a sling or anything like that. It's definitely not a bludgeoned hit. It's like a perfect little sphere that's gone through the skull. He said there's no radial cracks, which indicates the projectile entered the skull at an extremely high velocity.
You mean like a bullet?
Yeah, the auroch survived the shot because there's calcification around the hole, but it's identical to a bullet wound. So
how far back are we talking?
Okay, so we don't know because aurochs, well, the last survivor was in Poland in the 1600s, right?
Okay.
But this is in Siberia. And the last surviving auroch in Siberia was, I think it's 1000 CE.
So it's Middle Ages.
At least we're looking at a gun fired through the head of a buffalo, over 1,000 years ago, which, again, this totally blows out the idea of the development of gunpowder and weapons of that nature.
It does, but I mean, you got to wonder, is it that, obviously it would be difficult. I think difficult's the wrong word, but perhaps would it be plausible that possibly someone would discover gunpowder? Before we actually believed that we discovered gunpowder.
Well, actually, let me give you an update because there's Renee Norbergen who states that Professor Flerov and colleagues determined that the auroch skull in question, because you can imagine they could date it somehow, they said it's circa 3000 BCE when it was shot.
No.
So that changes everything.
Yeah, that's
insane. But as always, there's always an older example. A far more extreme example comes from a cave in Broken Hill in Kabwe, which when they found it, it was still Rhodesia. It's Zambia today. But the discovery was a hominid, and it's known as Rhodesian man or Homo rhodesiensis, basically a subspecies of archaic humans. They inhabited South Africa about 700,000 to 300,000 years ago.
No, you're not going to tell me.
Now we're talking huge stretches of time, so hang in there. On the left side of this Rhodesian man's skull, this ancient hominid, is again a perfectly round hole. There's no radial cracks that would have resulted from the use of a spear or an arrow. Only a high-speed projectile such as a bullet could have made a hole like this. The skull directly opposite the hole is shattered, having been blown out from the inside. This same feature is seen in victims of head wounds received from shots from a high-powered rifle. No projectile moving at a slower speed could have produced either the neat hole or the shattering effect. A German forensic authority from Berlin has positively stated that the cranial damage to the Rhodesian man's skull could not have been caused by anything but a bullet.
Astounding.
Think about this for a second.
It's astounding.
At least 300,000 years old. This is a pre-modern human, not even Homo sapien. And he's got a bullet wound in his head.
Is there, surely there has to be some type of other possibility. Is there?
Okay, great question. The other possibility is the dating's totally wrong. This pre-archaic human, maybe he's a weird deformity and he died 500 years ago. But the problem with this explanation is that he's buried under 60 feet of earth. And there's no way 60 feet of earth can build up over only 500 years.
Right. And even if it was a deformity, most anthropologists would be able to tell whether or not it is a species of humans, or of Homo sapien that has a deformity. So that kind of rules that out.
So he was hunted. He was killed at least 300,000 years ago, maybe older. So I love this stuff because you start to question, we think of the precursors to modern humans. Were they really, dressed in rags and living in caves? Were they really monkey-type men? The usual depictions you see in your evolution textbooks. Is that really how it was? Or were they incredibly intelligent, advanced, essentially humans like us in many ways, who had advanced civilizations. I mean, you've got to, again, think of the layers of complexity that are required to develop a firearm.
Exactly. But then
That's civilization technology.
you're right. But further to that, then why isn't that there's more evidence of it? Because if it's just one skull with a bullet hole in it that's from that period, I mean, obviously, yeah, it's a long period of time and a whole heap of things could be lost. But if you need that much of a society to create those things, why isn't there more evidence that would be consistent with that?
Well, some would argue that there is. There's, ancient monuments that are beneath the sea, when the sea level was last that low, it's like, 100,000 years ago. There's examples like that. But in general, time just doesn't leave much behind.
No, it doesn't. You're right.
What do we expect to find after 10,000 years, let alone hundreds of thousands of years?
But then you have more exotic theories that this is a perfect example of time travel.
I was just going to say that. There's a portal, some temporal portal opened up. But how would that work? What, he got shot and then fell into a portal?
Well, maybe for their time travel. No, not even a portal. Like maybe it's like a time traveler because think about it. If you're going to be a time traveler, you would take a gun. And they've time traveled somewhere. They've come across this guy. He's attacked them, and he's been all, and they're just like, oh, easy, just shoot the guy.
Some future mafia is like, it's a very difficult situation.
I don't think it's.
We need to get rid of Jimmy the Fish.
You need to stop watching The Sopranos. I know you've been watching a lot of that.
You need to go back to the year 300,000 years ago and clip Jimmy the Fish.
No, I think it's more likely that if time travelers do exist, that they've basically taken. But then, right, if they are time travelers, you would think that it would be a more futuristic technology. So why would they take a projectile weapon? Why would they take a laser weapon, energy weapon, something like that? So why wouldn't you go to the future to get hold of more advanced weaponry? So I guess that kind of rules that out.
Again, your insistence on this time travel explanation creates all sorts of conundrums.
A paradox.
When perhaps the simplest explanation is we don't fully understand the true history of civilizations on this planet.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We don't understand how many have risen and fallen and how advanced they were in the past. We just have no idea. And there's a lot of stuff that puts into question the understood development of human history.
Oh, look, it's the historical narrative is wrong. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, I don't think that historians are on purpose trying to distort it. It's just the information that they have. And because, as you said, Ben, it's so much is lost to time that really it's this puzzle that we're trying to fit pieces in. And you think that you've got the picture and then all of a sudden a new piece of the puzzle pops up. And, in some circumstances, maybe some people just go, oh, we'll just leave that piece out.
I highly recommend this book. There's over 400 pages of these incredible examples. He goes into ancient metallurgy, the Roman cement, the Baghdad batteries in there, those weird long Egyptian light bulbs are fully explained, along with modern experiments.
Can we briefly touch on some of the piezoelectric stuff in the plus section? Because I want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I want to mention some of the examples of machining that's from the ancient world.
Okay, great.
Where there's new modern technologies from engineers. It's like when engineers look at this stuff and they come back and say, oh no, this had to be a machine that created this statue. That's when you got to stand up and take note, because often the Egyptologists aren't expert engineers and they don't have the expertise to make these kind of judgments. And there's new advances in technology. For example, some of the precision cameras being used to zoom in on the statues have revealed that it must have been ancient lathes that were used on some of these Egyptian statues.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like the electron microscopy that's being used now on some of these things. And they are finding that the tools that were used would actually be at a precision that is higher than some of our advanced tools now.
Let's see if we've got time for that in our Plus extension coming up. And we have the
Mind
melters of the Norwegian Sea.
That is coming up. We're also going to have cloud form Bigfoot, a totally new form of Bigfoot, coming up in our Plus extension right after this.
Awesome. To get access to that, head to mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. You know the drill. Sign up today, $9 a month. Get access to our Plus membership. Gives you these big extensions we do every single Friday. And if you're a Plus member, you get an entirely exclusive show that comes out on Tuesday. You're getting more than double the content if you sign up for Plus. And you also get discounts off digital products in our store, a higher quality audio version of the show exclusive to Plus, a totally ad-free version of the podcast, and all the features of our apps are unlocked for Plus members as well. Check it out, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Sign up today. Help support your favorite show. That's a wrap for this free edition of MU. Thanks for listening. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.